So, my name's Clark Stacey. Grateful to Casual Connect for having me again this year. I am the CEO of a company called WildWorks, and I'm going to talk about something a little controversial today. I'm going to talk about monetizing games for kids. It's a topic that raises a lot of questions in the minds of developers and consumers, and probably should. It's a question that my company has given a lot of thought to, and I'm going to talk about some of the answers that we've come up with to these questions. We are, though, very open to changing our approach. I think that this should be a dynamic conversation among developers in our industry, and something that we should not avoid. But a little background, we have a web-based social MMO for kids called Animal Jam. We've just launched a mobile version of it just a few months ago. So we've been thinking about this topic of monetization quite a bit. We've had great success with Animal Jam as a web game. It has grown to be the #1 social network type game for kids in the world. It's now in 5 different languages, 50-some million players. Its growth has accelerated pretty steadily over the 5 years it's been in operation. Now it registers about 1.5 to 2 million new players per month. About 6 months ago, about 6 months ago, we expanded the Animal Jam universe to mobile devices with an app called Animal Jam Play Wild. To date, we have done no paid user acquisition with this game. The only user acquisition has been announcing it in the Animal Jam web world. On that basis, though, it's been downloaded 1.5 million times. It has a daily player base of a little over 100,000. It is monetizing very well, particularly for a game in the kids category. We're seeing strong retention and conversion KPIs. And it is consistently ranked among the top 5 grossing games in the kids category, certainly in the US, but in a lot of other countries as well. It's been #1 and kind of vacillates between #1, #2, and 3 in the kids category on both iPhone and iPad. This wasn't our first app for kids, and what I want to talk about today is some of the things that I wish I'd known when we were getting into the kids app market. It's very easy to find data on the top apps in the games category. There's a lot of people providing that data. It's free, it's easy to find. That data is much harder to come by in the kids category, so I'm going to talk pretty frankly about what we've made and what the challenges have been, and how I think that compares to the broader games category and some of the problems that creates. But to talk about the kids app category in more general terms first, Dubit, I never know how to say it, in the UK released a study at the beginning of last year that was, they're a great research outfit, and I recommend their research very highly. It was an excellent study, but I think some of its conclusions may have painted kind of a rosy picture of the economics of the kids app category. They noted that if you looked at the top 50 highest grossing kids apps, most of them are paid downloads. That is, they're not using in-app purchase, they are just paid premium downloads. They charge up front to play, and while 98% of the games in the broader games category are in-app purchase driven, very few, fewer than half, use that model in the kids category. They conclude then that kids apps don't have to be free in order to be among the top grossing, which is true in the kids category. But it definitely begs the question of what is it worth then to be in the kids category? How does that compare financially to being in some of these other categories? I think we all know what some of the top grossing games look like in the games category, and this data is probably a few days old, but really this hasn't changed that much over the last year. A couple of new players in there, but this is in the US, of course, and this is just iPhone. But the top grossing apps in the games categories, we all know they make millions of dollars a day across their different platforms. But how much then do the top games in the kids category make in terms of grossing? I don't know what all of them make right now, but our Play Wild app has been the top grossing app in the kids category, and it has been in the top 5 since it launched, and I do know what it makes. So I picked a particular day in December, and on this day, this is just US and just iPhone, it was the number 131st grossing game in the games category, while it was the number 1 grossing game in the kids category. And iPhone revenue for that day on Play Wild was a little under 15,000 for iPhone in the US, or just under 1% of what the top app in the games category makes. And that pretty much carries forward for Google Play and the other app stores that we're in. It also carries forward for the other, for iPad and in the other territories that we're in. So right around 1% of what the top game in the games category makes. And of course, as it does in the games category, that falls off precipitously from number 1 to even to number 5. And by the time you get down into the top 50, you're really not making very much at all. However, here are some games for kids that are among the top grossing in the games category. And you might ask then, how are they doing in the kids category? They're not in the kids category. They don't qualify to be in the kids category. They aren't there because in order to be in the kids category, you have to comply with certain regulations, COPPA in the United States, and its equivalents in other territories, in order to protect kids' safety and abide by some certain standards around monetization. The most profitable apps for kids that are out there succeed by pretending that they're not for kids. Bottom line is that the kids category is never going to be the home to $1 million a day games. And that is actually as it should be. Why do I say that? Because in order for games for kids to have that kind of monetization, they have to have whales. That's what makes this work for the games category, right? The problem with that is that those games that have whales need to be designed so that big spenders can spend a lot, right, and do it very often. The underlying issue, though, is with the prefrontal cortex. We all have one. It turns out it is the part of our brain deciding whether or not something is a good idea or not. It is also the last part of our brains to develop in childhood. In fact, your prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until your early 20s in most cases. Or in my case, it's still working on it. It basically means that children are not equipped they're not just more susceptible to coercive monetization. They are biologically unequipped to make rational decisions in front of all the pressures that most free-to-play games can bring to bear on them. But let's look at, before I get into how we're monetizing Animal Jam in the App Store specifically, look for a moment again at the kids category and what's succeeding there now. First of all, it's primarily not games that are succeeding financially in the kids category. In fact, only 2 of the top 20 kids apps when I looked were games, or what I would call games in that category. Most of them are targeted to younger kids, that is preschool and early readers, say up to 6 or 7 years old. And most of them are subscription-based. They are curated video and storybook apps. Apps like ABC Mouse and Play Kids are doing great work here, and they're enjoying some well-deserved success. Our app is a little bit different, and the Animal Jam property is a little bit different. For one thing, our demographics are older, where most of them are geared to kids under 7. Our core demo is 8 to 11, more girls than boys. And in terms of being educational, while we do have a licensing partnership with National Geographic, we have a lot of educational content in the game, we don't call it an educational game. Education is not its primary purpose. Our goal is to spark curiosity about science and the natural world in kids, and then provide the information that kids can drill down on topics that interest them. But we don't have an overt educational agenda, and so we don't classify it in the educational section of the App Store. It's just classified as a game. In fact, when we look at how players actually use Animal Jam and Play Wild, we see that it's really more of a hybrid between a game and a social network. They spend a lot of time interacting with friends, trading items, going to parties, chatting, trading artwork, the same sort of stuff that they're doing on Instagram or WhatsApp. According to a recent BBC study, this just came out a week or 2 ago, 78% of kids 12 and under are using social networks in the UK at least, these social networks that don't want them to be there, that they have to lie about their age in order to register accounts. In fact, these are not safe places for kids to be online. Leaving aside the largely clickbait bugaboo of online sexual predators, they are not friendly places for kids to be online. If anybody's familiar with the average YouTube comment thread, it's not some place that you'd want your kids hanging out. Right? They can be pretty brutal. So rather than deny kids the advantages of social networks, we've tried to deliver a safer and hopefully friendlier alternative. But I alluded before to most of the successful games in the kids category being subscription-based. And if that's the case, you might ask why we have not pursued that model for our mobile version of Animal Jam. It's been very successful for us, a very successful model on the web. Why not use a similar model for mobile, or even combine the web and mobile subscriptions? There is a lot to recommend the subscription model for kids. Parents understand subscribing to something. Kids often have magazine subscriptions. It's unambiguously ethical, I think, and it is sustainable. The problem is we've only really seen it work for apps targeting those younger kids, the kids under 7. And for those apps whose primary function is education, usually book and video apps. In other words, the apps that currently represent the most successful games, or the most successful titles in the kids category. Another reason is that, according to our research at least, parents of older kids don't really seem to like the subscription model. Parents of younger kids certainly do. Of older kids, less so. The reason being, there is so much free content on the App Store. And it turns out that kids under 12 are using more apps in one day than any other demographic up through adulthood. They are jumping around from app to app more often than anybody else in the App Store. How likely are you as a parent to want to subscribe to an app and pay a monthly fee when you see your child hopping around among different apps so much? It's not a model that really appeals to parents for that reason. If your kid's playing 5 different games on a tablet all at the same time, a monthly subscription doesn't look like that good of a deal. So if we didn't choose the subscription model, and we don't accept advertising, that's kind of part of our deal with parents, is that in the web game and in the mobile game, we don't advertise. Where do we wind up with monetization? We chose what I call content freemium. That is, we sell durable content that is purchased once in the game and then can be used infinitely after that. I would distinguish that from consumable content, which we do not sell. In the Animal Jam web game, we found that one of the data points that we study is when a child first gets a subscription in Animal Jam, what's the first thing that they do? What is the first content that they go and get? Because that's probably what drove them to want the subscription, right? To go and persuade their parents that this was a good deal. And we found that overwhelmingly, what they did first was go get new animal avatars. You become your favorite animal in Animal Jam. That are 25-something different animals that you can become. And the first thing that they did was go get new animal avatars. In the web game, free players can only have 2. In the mobile game, they can also have their free animal avatars, but they really want the new ones or the unique ones that are just coming out. So sales of new avatars are the cornerstone of our monetization in the mobile game. In keeping with the educational objectives we do have, we are creating new multimedia ebooks about each animal species as we bring a new avatar out. And when you make a purchase of one of these animal avatars, it comes with this ebook, and that's an enduring value for parents. They can see that even if their child stops playing Animal Jam, they still have this collection of ebooks about these animals. If they have to write a report on wolves, that's a resource that they have there for them, and we can do those at a very high production value. We knew that this model would take to build, though, because when we brought Animal Jam into mobile, we brought it in 3D. And it's a 2D Flash front end in the web. So bringing all of the content that we've spent the last 5 years building in the web is going to take a long time to bring over to mobile. We are releasing new animal avatars monthly or so, along with other content, some of which is paid, some of which is free. But all the core features of the game, all the social features of the game, all the educational content, video, everything else in the game, that is and always will be free. But the downside of this model is that we don't have a lot to sell in the game yet. There's really only 4 or 5 items for sale, some dens and different animal avatars. It takes a while to build up a catalog big enough that you really have much to sell. So that's going to take a while. Getting our pricing right, we know, is going to be a trial and error process. But when I look at the stuff that we decide to offer for purchase in the game, I ask myself one question. If this in-app purchase was a toy, and I was a toy seller, and I just sold it to a parent, would I want to be there when the child opened it, right? Would I want to see the look on the child's face when they took it out of the box? Because that really is what we're selling here is toys. That's the way that a child sees an in-app purchase. So am I confident in the value that we're providing for what we're charging? Parents are not just friction in our payment flow. They are our customers as much as the children are. The best way to overcome their skepticism about our in-app purchases is to become a trusted brand. And we only become a trusted brand if every time they open one of those in-app purchases, they don't feel ripped off, right? So durable items, I kind of distinguished this before from consumable items. You buy them once and you have them forever. These are the mainstay, the consumable items of the highest monetizing mobile games. They are things like short-term buffs, things that you buy to skip a timer mechanic and continue playing. I am candidly uncomfortable with the ethics of selling consumables to kids of any age. Those things are fine in games for adult players. And I'm not saying that it can't be done ethically with kids, but I'm not sure that I've ever seen it, and it would take some convincing for me, I think. But even with the content freemium, the idea that we're selling durable things that you only have to buy once, there is still a lot of room for abuse in that. If you look at the cons up there, the last one, if you're going to ethically implement this type of in-app monetization for kids, you are not going to have those $1 million a day type games. The temptation is always there to abuse this model like anyone in order to push that monetization up more quickly. That doesn't mean that there isn't, though, a very strong business still to be done here, but I think it requires some guidelines. So here's some guidelines, some proposed guidelines anyway. These are the ones that we try to follow at WildWorks anyway. We don't claim that these are perfect. We certainly are open to questions and criticism about them. I think that this should be a dialogue in our industry among kids developers. The first of them is to be very wary of consumables, as I mentioned. The second is that free means free. If your game is free, it should be actually free to play, not just free to shop, right? Not just to interact with an interface that lets you look at the paid downloadable content. I should explain about the sea monkeys a bit. When I was a kid in the 70s, the exploitative monetization of kids happened in comic book ads. The ads for sea monkeys promised what you see on the left there, but they delivered a plastic cup of brine shrimp, which is what you see on the right. If you found those things living in your basement, you might be tempted to move out and just burn your house to the ground, and nobody would blame you. They're loathsome little animals. What I mean by don't sell sea monkeys is the same thing as selling a parent a toy and being there when they open it. It means don't sell disappointment. No parent should ever have to call shenanigans on your in-app purchase. Opening a toy should create delight, never a feeling that you've been hoodwinked, as I was with sea monkeys. When a child buys something, it's theirs. They see it as a toy, right? If you sell them a virtual sword, they should not need to buy energy crystals in order to go out and use the sword. For them, it's a toy. They bought it, they opened it, it's theirs to play with. They should be able to do whatever they want with it from then on out. They should be able to fully enjoy that purchase without having to buy anything else in order to do it. And finally, be transparent with parents and kids. Be upfront about the presence of in-app purchases, how to prevent them, present your privacy policy in simple, understandable language, simplify the conversion rates between real money and virtual money so that it's understandable, they can understand what they're spending. Err on the side of transparency. So that's what we've tried to do, and the means by which we're monetizing Play Wild. And so what have we learned? We've learned that our revenue is very content-driven. You can see in the first couple of months of release, we didn't have much of anything to sell in our online store. We did a big Avatar release in early December, and revenue shot up. Our next one's coming up this week, actually, and we'll be refreshing content at least monthly. It's also very much driven by school schedules. This is certainly true of the Animal Jam web game, but it surprised us a little bit with mobile. We expected the big spike on Christmas there because kids are out of school and a lot of them just got iTunes gift cards and things that they want to spend in the game. But we figured that having a portable version of the game would smooth that out a little, that kids would be able to take it to school and play during breaks, that it would not be as weekend spike driven. That clearly isn't happening. But it made more sense when we saw which platform is generating the most sales, that on iOS anyway, revenue is overwhelmingly coming from the iPad players. Over 3/4 of it, in fact. And we know those players are less likely to be playing during the school day because the iPad is more of an evening and weekend device for them. And we learned that of the different types of content we're releasing for real money purchase, avatar animals are by far the most compelling for kids, followed by dens that they can decorate and host gatherings of their friends in. Obviously, this is not sustainable for an app that we want to be a successful children's IP for many years because eventually we will run out of different types of animals. In fact, you run out of cute animals pretty quickly. So in the long term, what we need to do is be able to cycle content as we do with a web game. We have some animals that migrate, for example, and they're gone for part of the year and then they come back. We have other animals that go on adventures and then they come back and visit. And so we're able to kind of even out those content spikes by bringing content in cyclically. Players in our game use the same user ID to log in to both the Animal Jam web game and the mobile game so that they have a consistent social networking ID across both. So we can look at how many of the Play Wild accounts, the mobile accounts, also have web accounts and how they monetize compared to web players. We were surprised to see that despite the fact that the mobile game has only been promoted so far just to existing AJ web players, twice as many of the mobile players do not have connected web accounts. That is, wherever they found out about the game, they are not connecting it to their web account, whether they want a separate social identity or whether they are coming in because their friends have brought them into the game or what, but that was a surprise to us. We are happy to see that our lifetime value for converted players is not excessive and that paying players are spending around $4 to $6 a month, which is about what they spend in the web version. As I said before, we don't want whales, and that might sound surprising, but the fact we really don't want players going in and buying all the content in the game at once. Whales in adult free-to-play games are what keeps their ships afloat, right? But in kids' games, whales will capsize the boat and kill everybody on board because they will bring down the wrath of parents, of platform holders, and of regulators. Ethical monetization of kids' games is frankly the only kind that makes good business sense. I think of it this way. My little boy is into Hot Wheels cars. So from time to time, as a treat, we will get him a new Hot Wheels car. And maybe on special occasions like birthdays or holidays, he might even get a few Hot Wheels cars all at once. But no parent is going to buy their child every Hot Wheels car there is unless they're totally brain damaged, right? And even if that were even theoretically possible. So to sum up, for our plan anyway, the first part of this plan we just talked about. The second has been a cornerstone of growth for the web game version of Animal Jam all along. And we're adding new social features to the game with every update. Moving from charging, right now, all of our in-app purchases are in real money. If I want to buy a new avatar animal, it's $1.99. But we can't keep that going because as we add more catalog items, it becomes very difficult to manage that with real-world currency for each. it only really works when you just have a handful of purchasable items. It becomes unwieldy when you have dozens of them. There are good user interface reasons that the most successful mobile games only have 4 or 5 sellable items for display in their shops, right? It's much easier for players to just have a few different denominations of a virtual currency, buy that, and then spend it at the rate that they want and at the level that they want. I think that can be done, at least with kids in our demographic, ethically, as long as the conversion rate there is straightforward and we're not trying to hoodwink them into thinking that they're not spending real money by having some esoteric, crazy conversion rate between real and virtual money. And keep the content coming, which is what we've had to do in the web game and will continue to do in the mobile game. It becomes a content arbitrage game for us. And now, after 5 years, there are millions of pieces of content in the web game, and we'll continue building that until we have the same in the mobile game. So thank you for your time here today. If we have any time for questions, I'd be happy to answer any.
How are you getting users to keep you up in the top, or that at least got you up in that spot to begin with?
So far, we've not done any user acquisition in the mobile game. The only user acquisition that we've done is announce the presence of the mobile game in the web game. Now this week, actually by the end of this week, assuming our update's approved by Apple and all that, we will be starting our first formal user acquisition, mostly in some of the other languages that we have a presence in Portuguese and Spanish especially. But so far this has all been entirely organic through the strength of the Animal Jam IP in the web.
I have another question. Okay.
Sure.
Are you seeing a good conversion rate on kind of people who have already spent?
From the web game?
No, from the inside of the mobile game, where you're seeing a lot of return spenders, or do you see people that just kind of buy one avatar and leave it at that?
We're only 4 months in, so it's a little hard to tell. We are seeing retention rates, though, that suggest that they're going to be playing for a long time. I can tell you that in the web game, once we have a subscriber in the web game, they usually stay a subscriber for over 12 months. So and they usually stay a player, whether free or paid, for a lot longer than that. We now have a phenomenon of kids who were 14, 15 when they started playing Animal Jam, and they're in college now, and they still have Animal Jam YouTube channels they're still playing. I don't know if that'll happen on the mobile game. We hope so. But I think if our focus is on retention and engagement, those players will always monetize in one way or another eventually. Somewhere in the IP, they will. I'd rather focus on that than focus on the short-term monetization gains and more on focus on the retention and engagement part.
Do you offer any kind of incentive in the online game for a child to use the mobile game, or do you just sort of let them know that there is a mobile game, or hey, if you download the mobile game, you get a free special avatar and some long-term you own it consumable? So far there's been we have not been bribing kids from the web game to go into the mobile game. We are going to be providing benefits if you're a subscriber in the web game, because you're using the same social ID, even though it's not the same inventory database. That if I'm a subscriber in the web game, then maybe I get some free currency or some bonus item in the mobile game. So there will be that kind of connection and back and forth. But in order to stay in the good graces of Apple in particular and not be monetizing outside of their ecosystem, we can't be say rewarding with content to the same degree that we would in the web game for that web paid subscription that doesn't go through their coffers.
Hi, just a quick question. Maybe you can share what is an average, let's say, revenue per purchase or something like that. Like, what is an average amount that people willing to spend?
So far, we have not done any items. We've experimented with some bundling of different items and putting them together to have a purchase that might be as much as $4.99 or that. Now that we're moving over to a virtual currency, I think it's going to be. We're still not going to have any in-app purchases that are over $20. Say if you buy $20 worth of our in-game currency, that should last you for a very long time. Our goal overall is if we can have the player who chooses to spend money in the mobile game spend roughly what they would for a subscription, that is around $5 a month, we don't want to sell at a faster pace than that to them, because then they get everything and they burn out on the game and mom starts to resent it. And I think that our target is for, among paying users, that it be around a $5 a month our ARPPU, and that's about what we're seeing so far. Again, we're 4 months in, so at least in the monetization part. All right. Thank you, everybody.